All right, this video today. Like some of y'all might not get this. I get it. Some people in this bass fishing world are die-hard bass fishermen. I think I'm one of them. But I didn't always necessarily grow up like that. I grew up catfishing, white bass fishing, brim fishing, did a little crappie. I caught all those before I ever caught a bass. I caught my first bass. I just remember I was in the 7th grade. So that was the first time I ever caught a bass. I've talked about it before. Through a Texas rig worm out there, a guy showed me. I was crappie fishing. It was pouring down rain outside, and I looked over there and started talking to him because, like I said, he put his boat in the big giant marina stalls on Lake Livingston, and he was like, "Hey, go over there with a Texas rig worm," because I'd never known how to catch a bass. Went over there and caught 2 bass. It was over from there. Now, I grew up on Livingston. Livingston is not known for its bass fishing. Fished a lot of tournaments on there, won a lot of bass tournaments. They had other tournaments on that lake, and they were a big deal. Trust me, they were a big deal to me because tournaments were tournaments. Like competition was competition, and I just wanted to fish for everything. So I've had these in my shop. Okay, these are not bass tournaments. Those 2 trophies and those 2 trophies. Okay, this was the first one I ever fished, 1997. This one was not the pinwall tournament, but we fished it. Big old trophy. Man, it was the first, I'd won some bass tournaments by then, but it was a white bass tournament, got first place. Okay, 1998, we fished it. The 1998 annual white bass team tournament on Livingston, came in 2nd. This is 03, the pinwall tournament. That's big bass, and no, this is big bass. That's first place. Now, I'm not gonna lie, maybe I'm getting old, I don't know, but I was looking at them going, God, it felt like I did more than that. Like, I felt like I fished more tournaments back in the day. Like, I remember fishing these white bass tournaments. Now, I didn't fish all of them. Sometimes an actual largemouth tournament was on the same day, so we didn't always fish them. But there was like 97, 98, 2003. And I was like, God, it just felt, you know how like it just feels like you fish more of them? Well, we finally got some stuff out of the attic. I got my kids over there, and we were getting stuff out of our old house still, because we were still kind of the last things we had to move was stuff in the attic. And I came across some stuff. Now I have a lot of trophies and stuff at my mom's house. I have a lot of trophies. I have trophies in our house. I have all those trophies. And then I got belts and trophies and angler of the years, and I got stuff everywhere, right? Then I have a bin. I got one of these things, but way bigger than that. It's full of plaques. There's probably like 50, 60 of them in there. Then I found some more plaques, but look, I found more trophies. And I was like, man, I knew I fished more of them. So this was 97 as well. Came in 3rd place. That's 4th place in 01. Oh, 01, I guess I had big bass. We call a lot of big bass. I'm explaining that. And then these are all my Angler's Quest trophies from like Livingston and Houston. We won back-to-back championships on Lake Livingston and Houston. It was one day on Houston, one day on Livingston. And then a couple of the super teams. And then there's my first tournament I ever got in. There was an individual. It was a 2-day event, and I won it. Now, why are those special to me? Or why am I glad I figured them out? Let's talk about the white bass deal. The white bass deal was pretty cool. We knew how to go out there and jig them up. Like everyone, a lot of people trolled and stuff, and I didn't like trolling. I wanted to actually get out there and find them jigging what we called an over-liable. Okay, over-liable was this green piece of slab. I still use them to this day. Let me go get one. That's not all of them, but I had some real quick. This one was the deal. Eyes missing, paint's missing on them. That color was the best one. Yellow was good, white was good. You want to talk about me being a little kid and painting them. That was when I first started painting them. So those things crushed the white bass. They to this day, those are better than every single other jigging spoon out on the market, in my opinion. And you're gonna be like, there's no way that is. I'm telling you, those trophies show they are. They're just better. They always caught bigger fish and more of them. And you're going to be like, oh, white bass are easy. Like any fishing, yes, it's easy when it's good, but sometimes and anybody that fished Livingston knows that like you can go a while without catching them, or they're not biting, they're not feeding, or they get a lot of pressure, they start getting hard. They just do. Like you start doing this every single day like we did, you run into lulls, big time lulls. Especially on, like, anyone that knows white bass fishing knows about the lulls of white bass fishing. As bass fishermen, I think we get into them when they're like feeding, right? When it's easy. But if you're like, hey, just go out there every single day. And I used to guide when I was like a high schooler and college kid for white bass. And not a lot, but I did it. We did really good on that. We started figuring out how to catch some big ones off boat docks, cranking boat docks. That was the thing. But let me tell you, most of those big bass, you know how we caught them? Or how I caught, especially that first one. My buddy Eddie was with me, and most of those tournaments are with Eddie, my old buddy from high school. This is where I think it's important. Like that bass fishing came into play. I would take, back then, the only thing that was around was a spook. So I'd take a super spook, and I'd take all the hooks off and put giant hooks on there, like number 2s. Like the biggest hooks I could find almost. And I'd throw it out there in the middle when they were schooling. I didn't tell him this. Like, he got mad at me. He was like, why didn't you share it with me? I'm like, oh, I kind of came up with the idea of, you throw it out there, and you throw a regular one out there with regular hooks, and they instantly blow up on it, right? It's instant, right? I mean, there'd be acres of white bass. And it hits the water, you get one pop, and they eat it. And I was like, yeah, I don't want that. So I would get those big hooks, and they would blow up on it and blow up on it and blow up on it. Maybe like 20 blow-ups on a cast. Guess what? The only one that could eat it would be a giant one. And so, yeah, I wouldn't get as many bites, but when I caught one, it was a big one. So that first tournament we won basically on that spook, and I caught big bass on that spook with giant hooks. And I was pretty proud of that because as a young kid, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have magazines. We didn't have any of that stuff. It was like kind of that stuff is what I started learning about bass fishing and trying to figure out things on my own. Like it was my first I wouldn't say my first lesson. I'll get into that. But it was like one of those lessons I started learning of like trying to think out, maybe not outside the box, but you know, when you're 18, 19, 20, like I said, there was no one teaching you this stuff. There was no way to, all the tricks and all these things, there was no one there. You kind of had to figure it out on your own, which I think that's different now. I had the mentality back then, and when I used to talk to young people, I'm like, figure everything out on your own. Don't worry about getting information from other people. You'll only learn half the information. If you figure it out, you learn all the information. I don't know if that's the case anymore, right? I don't know if that's the way to do it because of the information out there readily available at your hands. But at the time, that's the way I thought. Now, we caught a lot of doing that. We caught some cranking boat docks. We figured out that some of these giant white bass hung out on like a stump here or there, some concrete in the water. Like we started figuring out some other things along the way, kind of from bass fishing. We would bass fish all these things trying to catch bass, and every once in a while we catch these giant white bass. So we kind of progressed from that to doing that later on. Like a couple years later, the more we were bass fishing, the more we realized that during our bass fishing tournaments, we'd catch some giant white bass. So that evolved a little bit from 97 to like 2003. When we got those first in like 2003. I think 2003 was probably the last time I fished one. I think there was a couple years in there where we fished bass tournaments, but I don't think we ever finished under like 4th place. What's cool about, and I'll bring this up, and why I'm bringing all this up. You know how there's some guys out there that play professional sports? There's some kids out there that only play one sport, and they play it year round, and that's just what they do. I don't really know what's right or wrong about that stuff. Like, if that's what you do, great. Maybe there's more burnout. I'm not sure. If you talk to the old school athletes, Jordan and all of them, they were asking about like AAU and playing year round, and Jordan was like, year round? I was playing baseball. Like, I was playing baseball. I wasn't playing basketball year round. Not at that age. And so many of those old school sports guys all said the same thing. Multiple sports, multiple sports. And I believe the same thing. I'm trying to get I think certain sports translates over and whatever. I think the same thing about fishing. I really do. I don't know how. I'm just telling you, I think knowing how to catch a catfish and a crappie and a white bass, maybe not. I don't know. It just seemed like there was carryover between those two. Is there? I don't know. But I will say one thing, and I don't know which one it is. But one of those trophies is an Angler's Quest individual tournament. I was very young. I'd only fished tournaments for a couple years. By far my first individual one on Livingston. Livingston it's one of those lakes where you got to fish 4 foot or less. And I had figured out some deep stuff where I lived, but not across the entire lake. Well, I was convinced. I learned about the Carolina rig and a Bassmaster magazine and was catching them on it. And I was convinced that I could go catch fish deep on Livingston. I'd already caught them kind of deep on where I lived. And so I kind of knew that. But I'm like, man, I got to be able to do it on certain parts of the lake. And I started putting in some time. And I'm going to tell you, I hear some things about people about dedication. All right, let's get real. I'm going to get real with you. In comments and stuff and all these things, you start hearing about these older fishermen. And all this stuff about these young guys are spending more time on the water than these old guys and things like that. Look, I don't know. I'm not saying I spent a lot more time on the water sometimes when I was younger. I spend different time on the water now. What I'll say is this. When I go live scoping, it's pretty easy. In the sense of this. It's pretty easy to do it because you're not fishing that hard when you don't see them. So you're always trying to find them and look for one, you know, or you do see some. Like the confidence of live scope is through the roof. And what I mean by that is like you can look all day long, and if for some reason it's not like side imaging, because even when you're side imaging, you can miss them. You don't see them. You're covering a lot of water, but you don't see the suspended ones. You don't see the ones suspended on stumps. It's just not the same confidence. Like sometimes when you see them, like they're not bass, they're drum, they're cat. If you're on Lake Fork in certain places, yeah, they're probably bass. But on these other lakes, it's not that easy. And a lot of times you're doing it for like brush piles and things like that. But if you're like truly searching with live scope, the confidence is like through the roof. If you don't see anything for 5 hours, it's not a big deal. You're not around them. So you're not fishing. But when you're fishing without live scope, like we did back in the day, maybe I sound like an old guy. Maybe some old guys on here will mention it. I'm not saying we walked uphill both ways in the snow, but it is different when you're out there casting and you're not always casting on these big schools. So you're trying to get one bite here sometimes and one bite there, and that might lead you to 10 bites later. But dude, you can spend hours out there casting and not getting bit. And you might be throwing around fish, right? We're now learning we were probably throwing around fish and they didn't eat our crankbait. With live scope, if you get around them, like you can kind of make them bite, or you can see if they're interested, all these different things. The confidence to sit out there for 12 hours is really kind of easy. I'm not saying live scope's easy. A lot of people sit there and say live scope's easy. What people don't understand about live scope is I hear some guys talk about it like they truly don't understand it. I'm not sticking up for it. What I'm saying is like the mindset of doing it and the confidence you get of when you cast, you're throwing out a bass a lot of times. And like when you get good at it, it's a totally different mindset. That mindset is what's different from the young guys to the older guys. The older guys are trying to learn how to live scope. The young guys already know it, and their mindset's different when they look at it. I had to change my mindset on live scope. Not right or wrong, not banning it, none of that junk. Like I had to get in a different outlook on it. Okay? And I think that's very hard for guys my age. I'm just one of those guys that I'm not gonna let age or any of that. I'm gonna keep figuring it out. It brings me back to that. I said almost every day on my little 14-foot green stick steering 40 horsepower Evinrude Ouachita 1976 boat, and went out there and threw a Carolina rig for 2 weeks on that main lake of Lake Livingston. Dang near without a bite. I did it. They talk about these kids like fishing all the time. I'm sorry, man. That's different. We didn't have YouTube or any of that stuff, man. It was just, people talk about love of fishing. I'm not going to mention his name. I had this professional fisherman. He's young. He's trying to tell me he loved fishing more than me. And I'm like, dude, people are giving you $50,000 and you had to win a tournament to go fish. And you're talking about you love the sport more than me? Dude, you ain't sacrificed nothing. Dude, you haven't sacrificed anything. You're out there, people giving you money to go out there and fish, and you got the nicest boat at 22, 21 years old. You've never had a job. Like, what are we talking about sacrifice? I'm sorry, but like, I was like, man, you don't love the sport. I mean, until you go do what I've done, man, you ain't worked at Papa John's like I did for years, making nothing, trying to figure out this whole, like, no one gave me money at 21. No one, dude, he was getting he was getting so much money to travel around. And he talks about, oh man, I just love the sport. I think I love it more than everyone else. I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, hey man, I told him straight up, I was like, dude, don't ever say that around me again. I sat out there, and the first spot I got in 2 weeks on that Carolina rig was a 5-pounder. You want to see it, man? I was floored. I fished that tournament right there. On day one, I don't know if I was in first or second. I was in first. I can't remember. I caught a 5-pounder off that spot on a Carolina rig, and I was like, got it. I ended up winning that event. I put in a lot of time trying to learn everything and stuff like that. And what does all this mean, man? I'm just kind of letting you know, like, I still get comments about me live scoping one time, like one fish, and they're all like, oh, whatever they say. I could care less what they say. Man, I did that 25 years ago. Man, I'm a tournament fisherman. They get rid of it next year, I'll still be all right. If they keep it, it'll be all right. It has to be. That's what I want to do. I want to fish. I don't want to fish against 15 people. I hope some more people start showing up at some of these events. But either way, that's my little story about I don't know, a little bit about like some of these trophies, and looking back at what I did when I was younger and how it was just different. And it's different, and it was like looking at these kids now. Some of them got it hard. Not all of them. Some of them, though, some people are like, oh man, they're out there working harder and doing all that. They're out there maybe more than some of those old guys. I'll give them that, no doubt. Is it as hard to work? I mean, fishing, like catching fish isn't hard. That's not hard work. Like, you go out there and just catching fish. Like, there are days I go out there with that live scope in February, and I catch 60. Of course I want to spend 14 hours out there on the water. It's freaking awesome. Going out there and not getting bit, I'm sorry, but the old days, man, I think personally, the separation and the disconnect between old and young, no one's right or wrong here. I'm telling you, if you've made it this far, the disconnect between old and young, I think is some of the old guys think that they had to work for it more than the younger guys do. It's not the young guy's fault. Listen to what I'm saying. There's going to be some guys comment on this. It's not the young guy's fault. It's not the old guy's fault. It's just the way it is. And it's changed, but I still think some old guys have a little resentment on the younger guys that it's easier for them. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm going to repeat that over and over again for the people in the comments. I'm saying I think that might be what it is. Just like the old guys going, man, I had to walk to school uphill in the snow both ways, right? I'll leave you at that. See y'all.